We are now in your third year clinical pathology. The topic will delve mostly on diagnostic, laboratory diagnostic, its methodology, principles, interpretation, and its clinical relevance to disease processes. So we start with a topic on introduction to laboratory medicine. So it's very important that you understand the general principles of diagnostics, which are, uh, the discipline is known as clinical pathology or laboratory medicine because it deals mostly with diagnostics. So your faculty for this session is Socorro Crucianes, professor of the Department of Pathology. I gave you last week 3 important case scenarios that are illustrative of the important concepts that was taken up in the first lecture on Introduction to Laboratory Medicine. So the first topic we will discuss has the following objective. So this is a case that is illustrative of the different types of blood specimen, the different types of blood collection tubes, and the objective is we are able to identify this and we recognize where it is being used and understand the important specimen considerations of the use of the different types of collecting tubes because this impacts on the quality of the specimen. And then the other objective is to apply the different blood collecting tubes in the different laboratory tests because every laboratory test has a recommended collection tube to be used. And we need to understand and recognize the importance of what we call the order of draw in phlebotomy or blood collection. So the first case is illustrative of this objective. And we have here a 10-year-old female. So very important are the clinical information relevant to the appreciation of the case. You have a young female who is clinically diagnosed with juvenile diabetes and currently has clinical symptomatologies of urinary tract infection, which is kind of complicated with septicemia and diabetic coma. So you have a serious clinical scenario here. And when you have this kind of clinical setting, usually you have problems in phlebotomy because of one, pediatric, it's very hard to access the blood. Secondly, comatose patients or patients who are very sick might have additional problems of blood collections or difficulty in phlebotomy. And the following tests, because of the UTI, septicemia, and diabetic coma, were requested at the emergency room from the patient who is now unconscious. Okay, so our task is to fill up the correct response of the table provided, and these are the tests that were requested: CBC, ProTime, and partial thromboplastin time, coagulopathy tests, blood culture, random blood sugar, urinalysis, serum ammonia, urinary ketones, and glycosylated hemoglobin. And there are 8 tests requested. So this, at a single draw, you need to have 8 tests, enough blood to be able to test 8 different types of diagnostics. And there are different types of evacuation tubes that are used for this series of tests. And then we just match which type of evacuation tube shall be used for this, and then what is the underlying additive present in these different collecting tubes, and you identify the correct order of draw from A to H, with A being the first order of draw, and so on and so forth, and specimen considerations related to the different types of tests. So we go now here. Before we are able to answer this, we need to understand important concepts. First is the type of blood specimen, because this is very critical in choosing the type of phlebotomy tubes or collecting tubes, or what we call evacuation tubes. So these are synonyms. So there are two types of specimen with respect to blood, because you have different types of specimen. You have urine specimen, you have fluid specimen, can either be pleural fluid, pericardial fluid, CSF fluid, or you can have skin scrapings, etc., etc. So we're focusing on the blood specimen. Okay. So there are two types generally of blood specimen. You have what you call the whole blood specimen. When we talk about whole blood specimen, this means that this specimen is anticoagulated. So that means there is an anticoagulant that is put on the that is present in the evacuation tube. And you have different types of anticoagulant. You have EDTA, you may have heparin, you might have citrate, and this anticoagulant prevents clotting of blood. Okay. So what very important is, when this blood is allowed to settle in the collecting tube for about 5 to 10 minutes, the heavy portion containing red blood cells and leukocytes, mostly red blood cells, settle at the bottom. And then on the upper portion is the liquid portion of the blood, which consists of what we call the plasma. Okay? The plasma, since this is anticoagulated, contains fibrinogen. So that means because of the presence of an anticoagulant, there is no clotting and fibrinogen is not consumed. And therefore, fibrinogen stays in the supernatant liquid portion of the blood. So the supernatant of the whole blood is what we call plasma, which contains fibrinogen. And in between that is a fairly cellular layer of the blood, which is an interface between the plasma and the red cell elements, and which we call Buffy coat. And this is very important because Buffy coat is a source of specimen when you want to identify LE cells in lupus testing, because the Buffy coat contains a lot of white blood cells and platelet as well. The other type of blood specimen is what we call the clotted blood specimen. This one has no anticoagulant. So therefore, the natural process of clotting or clot activation is found here. And after 5 minutes, because you have the normal clotting time is 3 to 5 to 6 minutes. After a certain period of time, usually 3 to 6 minutes, the blood hardens into a clot, and the heavy portions of the blood settle at the bottom of your tube. And what happens on the liquid upper portion is termed, what is left on the upper portion is termed serum, because serum do not contain fibrinogen. So this is the important difference. Serum do not contain fibrinogen or fibrin, and these are seen in clotted specimen. So this is very important to understand when you want to do phlebotomy and you are requesting series of tests is what should I use? A coagulated specimen or a whole blood? And that is very important for you to appreciate and understand so that you're able to use the correct type of evacuation tube. Okay, so there are several types of blood collection tubes. The blood that you extract using a usually 22 to 27 gauge needle. There is a procedure for blood extraction, and the procedure is what we call phlebotomy. Okay, so when you do phlebotomy, there are important materials that you use. You have your needles, you have your syringe, you have tourniquet, you have swabs, alcohol swabs, in order to sterilize that area of extraction. So you do not provide contamination as well as secondary complication of infection during phlebotomy. So the most important material or supply in phlebotomy are the blood collection tubes. And this is an example of collecting tubes. And these blood collecting tubes contain various types of additives or anticoagulant, mostly anticoagulant. And it is important to recognize that they are color-coded. On the top, the cap of this evacuation tube contain caps that are color-coded, and the color means something. The most frequent, more frequent types of evacuation tubes that are used are the red top. The red top do not contain any anticoagulant, and what comes out is the serum portion on the supernatant. They do not contain coagulant. However, there are some instances that wherein you need to have rapid clotting of blood. Rapid clotting of blood, and you might need a gel activator, a serum clot activator, which will hasten or increase the rate of clotting. So you may want to use a clot separator or clot activator, and you can see it in this particular class slides. The other type of evacuation tube that are commonly used in the laboratory is the purple top. And the purple top means this contains EDTA that are commonly used in hematology, like CBC, erythrocyte sedimentation rate, and this produces what you call a whole blood component because you anticoagulate using EDTA, and what comes out on the upper portion, the liquid portion, is plasma. Okay, so the important thing to remember is when there is anticoagulant in your test tube, you must provide adequate mixing of your blood specimen with the anticoagulant. And the ideal is doing a 8 times figure of 8 mixing with your manually with your hands. So it's very important that you adequately mix it. Don't just pour or put the blood, extracted blood, onto the evacuation tube. You need to adequately mix it using a figure of 8 procedure with your hand. Okay, so the other important or common evacuation tubes that are used is the citrated tube, the blue tube, which contains sodium citrate. And this is very important evacuation tube that you use for coagulation testing, like prothrombin time, partial thromboplastin time. And the important specimen considerations that must be looked into for clotting or coagulation testing is the correctness of the ratio of blood with the anticoagulant. So there is usually a 1:9 ratio, and therefore it is important that you adequately fill the specimen with blood at the level of the registration lines. Okay. All tubes have registration line, and usually it is at the tip of the collar, like what you see here. So you fill the blood up to this layer, up to this layer, up to this layer, and it's very important, especially when you have anticoagulant, because of the need to maintain the blood additive ratio. Otherwise, you will have problems or introduction of spurious errors in your blood. Okay. And this is a more comprehensive look at the different type of blood collection tube that are color-coded and the anticoagulant that is being used and the uses of this. No anticoagulant for the red top tube. There's no need to have a blood anticoagulant ratio because there is no anticoagulant. And these are mostly used for serological examination. And you have this anticoagulant and the clinical uses for certain laboratory tests. Okay. What is very important to recognize also is the presence of a microtubes that are seen in pediatric patients, that are used in pediatric patients, because it's very difficult sometimes to extract 3 ml of blood, 3 to 6 ml of blood, and therefore you need to have a smaller evacuation tubes. And this is what we call microtainer. So this is basically a pediatric tube that are used for infants, newborns, and patients who have difficulty in collection, like for example, patients who are in shock states and all the veins are collapsed. It's very difficult to extract blood, or patients who have scarred, diffuse scarring of the skin. So it's very difficult to get into a vein, and you can only get few volume of blood. So therefore, what you can alternately use is a microtainer. Okay, so again, just to emphasize, the purple tube contains EDTA, ethylene diamine tetraacetic liquid. So the anticoagulant, you see them in the cell bottom, and this is the registration tube, and you have this area. And if you look at this, there's a space here, and this is where you put the labels. You put the identifying name of the patient, usually surname, followed by first name, written in full, no abbreviation. And then you also put in important requirements of date of extraction and time of extraction, because it is sometimes important when you do serial testing for platelet count, for blood sugar. So time information is important to write on the extraction tube, and also important to write the initial of the phlebotomist there. So you have here, you put all of this in this area here where you have a place to write the identifying data. And the use of the anticoagulant are mostly hematologic studies like CBC, that is also used in polymerase chain reaction, PCR, and glycosylated hemoglobin testing. So very important consideration is to ensure that there is full draw up to the registration mark. It should be well mixed, inverting the tubes 8 times by figure of 8 hand movements to prevent microclots or microaggregates. The other important tube is the light tube, or what we call citrated tube, because it contains sodium citrate. What is very important specimen consideration here is to ensure the full blood reaching the registration line, because you need to satisfy the 1:9 volume ratio, 9 blood, uh, one anticoagulant. Okay, so these are mainly used for clotting and the function tests. Okay, there is another important type of tube which we see here, and this is identified with a yellow color topping with a black line, and these are seen in collection tubes that are used primarily to test for presence or absence of microorganisms. So it's essentially a blood draw to get blood samples for blood culture. So the additive, it contains an additive, and the additive consists of a broth plus ACD. The ACD is the anticoagulant, uh, acid citrate dextrose, they act as anticoagulant. And the broth is our mixture, which preserves the viability and growth of microorganisms because of the presence of an appropriate growth media. So these tubes are sterile and must be important specimen consideration is during blood collection, you must collect it under aseptic condition. And these are mainly used for microbiological testing. Okay. The other very important tubes that are commonly used in the blood, in the laboratory, are the plain tubes, or what we also call red tubes, because they have no anti-preservatives or no anticoagulant, and therefore they have no preservatives or anticoagulant, and they are also what you call plain tube. That's because of the absence. And they're usually used for a lot of serological testing, blood chemistries, blood bank, and toxicology. Okay. So once you collect it, let the blood clot spontaneously by letting it stand for 3 to 5 minutes until the blood hardens into a clot. And you get the top portion, which is contains the serum for testing. And these are also used for serum ammonia testing. And when a serum ammonia testing is requested, make sure you chill the specimen after collection. Put it in a water bath containing ice chips and cup tightly, and do not expose to sunlight because of deterioration to temperature changes and light. The other important consideration is the order of draw, especially in this clinical scenario when you have 8 specimens that are requested. The order of draw is specifically used only for phlebotomy. So there is no order of draw for urine collection, stool collection, etc. So it is primarily used for blood phlebotomy. So what is the order of draw? The order of draw are blood collection tubes that must be drawn in a specific order in order to avoid cross-contamination of additives between tubes and ensure absence of contamination when there is important test for blood culture. So the national laboratory and groups and consensus and the WHO issued a recommendation on the order of draw. So this will include a series of blood to be taken, and where do you put the blood into what specific type of evacuation tube and in what specific order. Okay. So by general principles in the order of draw, if there is blood culture, it is the first order is the blood culture tube, which usually contains yellow black sterile stopper, and this is needed to be the first blood to be put into the evacuation tube to prevent contamination of bacteria. Then the second order is the second order is any collecting tube that contains used for coagulation, like the citrated or heparin, in order to prevent clotting, immediate clotting, which can produce errors in testing, and then followed by plain tube, and the last draw, and then after that are the series of additives, tubes containing additives in the following order: heparin, EDTA, and fluoride. Okay. And what is important to recognize is that tubes with anticoagulant must be mixed thoroughly when collecting blood, at least 8 times. Okay, this is the order of draw, the recommended WHO order of draw after collecting blood. If you have a series of tests, like in this particular patient, if you have a series of tests, you have a blood culture, you have CBC, you have coagulation, PT-PTT, and so urine, etc., ammonia, and so on. So you have series of tests, and where do you proceed? In what order of blood do you put in? So this is the recommended order of draw according to CSLI and also according to WHO. The first evacuation tube to put the blood is the sterile tube for blood culture, followed by anticoagulant for coagulation testing, citrated tube, the blue tube, followed by a tube which has no additive, the plain tube or red tube, and then followed by a series of tubes that contains additives. And this is the mnemonic, no? Sterile, light blue, red. Stop light means red. Stay put, when you stop, you stay put. Green light means go. So this is the mnemonic that you can use to do the order of draw. But in the clinical laboratory, usually we put a picture on the phlebotomy area to indicate and remind our medical technologists in the series of order of draw, because this can be very confusing. Okay, so having learned about what we just discussed, and this is the uh, answers to the problem that was uh, asked of the clinical scenario. For using for CBC, we use purple tube or containing EDTA. For coagulation testing, we use light tube containing citrate, or what we call citrated tube. For blood culture, we use the yellow-black uh, evacuation tube containing broth mixture of and ACD. For random blood sugar, this is a chemistry testing, we use a plain tube with no additive. And for serum ammonia, we recommend to use red, plain, or green tube containing heparin. And for glycosylated hemoglobin, we use purple tube containing EDTA, similar to hematology test for CBC testing. And this is the correct order of draw. We start with blood culture, followed by um, clotting tests, light blue, and then followed by fasting blood sugar, random blood sugar, plain tube or red tube, followed by EDTA containing additive of the purple tube, followed by EDTA, for urinalysis and urine ketone, there is no recommended order of collection. So these are the important specimen consideration, as we have already discussed. So we leave this case 1. Do you have any comments or questions? Do you have any comments, class? Any comments or clarifications or questions you need to ask? You can put it in the chat box. There's no... Okay. Oh, there's a reminder for you to uh, provide evaluation to the plenary session. Okay, so please accomplish that before we finish our session. So if there are no comments or questions, I would think that this is clear and clarified, and we proceed to the next case. The next case is about learning errors in laboratory. Errors can be very costly. Laboratory errors can produce misdiagnosis, they can produce litigation, they can even produce death in a patient because of fatal errors that was committed during diagnostic testing. So this case scenario, learning objective is to understand errors in the laboratory's testing and why they occur. And when we understand them, we are able to manage them properly by prevention, correction, and the error prevention can either be corrective prevention or uh, um, corrective prevention. And then we will go through the different types of errors. You have errors that can be corrected and errors that cannot be corrected, and how do you deal with those conditions? And then we will look into the gravity of errors, how extensive is the error, and if the error is extensive, do we need to discard the specimen? What would be our actions and reactions when error happens? So we have a case. This is for the case 2. We have a request for CBC, platelet, PTT, and PT was submitted to the laboratory for a possible bleeding diathesis from an infant patient. So again, you have a very young, and this provides us with possible problematic phlebotomy, who was admitted in the pediatric ward. The pediatric resident who performed the phlebotomy collected approximately 1 ml of her blood that is going to be put in a 3.5 ml blue top collecting tube. So when we talk about blue top, that means this collecting tube contains citrate. So this is what we call sodium citrate, citrated tube. And these tubes are usually used for tests for coagulation studies. Okay, so upon review of the requisition slip, the following data, so the laboratory specimen, the specimen was sent to the laboratory receives the specimen, and upon standard operating procedure, the laboratory personnel examines the requisition slip. So the requisition slip is a piece of paper which contains important information of date of the specimen, type of the specimen, what is the requesting test, what are the important tests that is requested. So this is all embodied in what we call the requisition slip. And the following data were generated or seen in the requisition slip. The name of the patient is R.L. Sanchez, and there is no information related to age and sex. And the referring physician provided her signature only, and there is no date of collection, there's no information, and the test requested indicated CBC with platelet count, PT, and PTT. So the problem was referred to you by the medical technologists who accepted the specimen. The first question is, will you accept the specimen? There are three possible answers to the scenario: yes, no, and a conditional yes with correction and provision of the correct information uh, uh, here. So we need to look what are the errors. Okay, we need to spot the errors. Okay, in this particular specimen as well as requisition slip. So the first question is, will I accept the specimen? Will the laboratory proceed with the testing? Is it a yes, no, or a conditional yes? So there must be reasons for this decision matrix. So it is important to look at the important errors here, and we can provide classification of errors. If the errors are correctable, you can correct it provisionally and accept the specimen. If they are incorrectable, the specimen and its information are fatally wrong, and therefore there is no way that you should accept the specimen, proceed to testing. And so your only recourse is to reject the specimen and request for another type of specimen. Okay. So we first look at the errors here before we can decide that whether we will accept, we will not, we will reject, or we will provisionally accept and provide correction. So the first error that I see here is the presence of abbreviated name, Sanchez RL. So policies within the laboratory requires that you provide the full name with no initials, because if you have a lot of cases coming in, especially if the name is very common, the chances are there might be 2 or 3 RL Sanchez in the specimen pool within the laboratory. So you need to have unique identifying names, and the way to provide that is to provide the full name with no initials. Okay, so that's the error, the first error. So is this correctable or non-correctable? So I think this is correctable because you can go back to the patient's side ward and or ask the physician or the nurses on the full name of the patient and then provide correction. The other type of error that we can spot here is the absence of information relative to age and sex. And this is very important because you have different normal values or reference values for different ages and different sex. So if this is pediatric, you use the reference value for CBC for pediatrics and newborn, and this departs significantly from the normal reference values of adults, male or female. So you need to have this information. The other error that we see here is the absence of the full name of the referring physician. There's only signature. It is important to recognize where is the who requested for the test, because it is going to have, we will have difficulty in transmitting the result to the correct physician. So we need to have all of this correct information. Another error that we can spot here is the case, the date, the absence of date. There's no information. This is very important in serial testing particularly. So we should provide that information. Okay, and the other error that we can spot is the presence of tests that are initial, like PT, PTT. PT might be mistaken for SGPT because sometimes doctors request PT and OT. So PT may mean prothrombin time or SGPT, a liver function test. So you need to provide initial full uh, text of the test requested. Okay, this is an example of a requisition slip, and a simple requisition slip containing the name of the hospital with the name, patient ID. These are all unique identifying information. Birth date, particularly important in uh, blood transfusion services. Birth date is very important, sex, and the source of specimen, date collected, time, the phlebotomist he did, the requesting physician, the location of the patient, whether in the emergency room or with particular ward, and the clinical diagnosis for clinical pathologic correlation, and then the requested tests. Okay, so that is an example of a requisition slip. So the other errors that was spotted here is the drawing of blood that is below the required 3.5 ml. So you're able to collect only 1 ml out of the 3.5 ml blue top collecting tube. So the implication here is that there is insufficient quantity of blood that was extracted. Number two, and the effect of insufficient quantity of blood collected is the deviation from the ideal blood clotting anticoagulant ratio. And this can produce spurious uh, uh, spurious increase of the clotting time. And therefore, the values that may be generated might be erroneous. And the other important error that is very fatal here is that, remember, you have CBC that was requested as well. And all the blood was put in a single citrated tube. And we know that there is wrong evacuation tube that is used here, because the preferred evacuation tube used for CBC testing is the purple tube containing EDTA. So if you put it in the citrated tube, this will produce erroneous result. So the question here, the problem was referred to you by the medical technologists, and the question here, will I accept the specimen? Looking at the numerous errors in the specimen and in the requisition slip. Will you accept yes, no, or conditional? Yes. So it is important when you answer this is you classify correctly the type of error, whether this is correctable and incorrectable. You have a series of correctable flaws or errors here. These are the correctable. We can easily go back to the patient and provide correction to the errors. But there are two important fatal errors that I see here: the insufficient quantity of blood and the wrong anticoagulant used to be for CBC testing. And therefore, this is an incorrectable error, a fatal error, and the important decision matrix is to reject the specimen, and the action that follows that is to request for another specimen, putting it in the correct, putting the blood in the correct tube, evacuation tube, and providing correct quantity of blood. Okay, so 3.5 ml in a very young patient is quite big. So you can request for using a microtainer tube, a small pediatric tube, to put in your CBC specimen and anticoagulant test specimen. So this is what we call a microtainer pediatric tube. So the decision is no, reject the specimen, and recommend for repeat collection. If your decision is to reject the specimen, what is or are the most important reason? What errors are deemed correctable and incorrectable? All this A, B are correctable errors. Letter C, letter D are fatal or incorrectable errors, which are important decisions to reject the specimen and as well and recommend for repeat collection. Okay, so we classify the correctable and incorrectable. So just to review from your lecture, what are laboratory errors? These are any defect in the different phases of the test that can lead to erroneous result and inaccuracies. And the clinical effect of erroneous result can lead to wrong diagnosis and wrong management and treatment, can lead to serious morbidity or even worse, mortality, loss of man hours because of repeat testing and money, as well as litigation. So the important thing to always to remember in laboratory testing is to reduce these errors into acceptable levels. So there are three phases of laboratory analytical processes. We have the pre-analytical phase, is the phase wherein it is a period of time from the time that the patient, the physician requests for the test and the patient prepares for the test, and you actually do the specimen collection, handle, transport, and bring to the area of the testing. So all of these are pre-analytical phase. The second phase is the analytical phase. This is the time wherein the test is actually performed within the laboratory, and that is what we call analytical phase. And the first is the post-analytical phase, is this phase wherein the results are generated, they are reported, they are interpreted and sent to the appropriate requesting physician. And this represents the post-analytical phase. So it is important to recognize that majority of the error, from 60 to 75%, the laboratory errors occur during the pre-analytical phase. So knowing this, it is important for us to reduce the errors into acceptable levels. So the acceptable levels is about 1 to 2% of the statistical test generated in the laboratory. So you can see here from different studies abroad, the sources of error: pre-analytical 62%, analytical 15%, and post-analytical 23%. So you can see that the analytical phase is the least phase that is least prone to error. And these are the possible errors related to analytical, pre-analytical, and post-analytical: improper tube filling, wrong patient ID, wrong use of collecting tubes, problems in the test requisition, empty tube, and the others. So all of these are generated in the pre-analytical and post-analytical. So if we handle this properly, we reduce the errors. About 80% of errors occur during the pre and post testing. So what would be the next question is, what would be the appropriate corrective measure in this particular case? So do you recollect blood? Yes, because these are fatal errors. Ensure that all essential patient information are included in the yes, that is correct. Require physician's name and not signature, correct. Reorient and retrain the personnel, not only laboratory personnel, but as well as personnel outside of the laboratory for specimen collection, and provide correct collecting tube. So the appropriate corrective measures would be all of these, the above responses. Further questions is, what would be the effect of this error? Further investigation by the pathologist disclosed that the phlebotomist had difficulty in performing blood collection via venipuncture and opted to do a capillary puncture technique using the left heel side. The blood collection lasted for 5 minutes, and this is very important to recognize, especially with requesting for coagulation testing. For 5 minutes, long duration of blood collection, you will introduce significant errors because this will approximate already the normal clotting time of the patient. So what are the possible errors or complications that can occur because of this method of collection? Is it hemoconcentration, spurious reduction of serum or triggering of clotting factors, and hemodilution? So the correct answer here is letter C, because of the long 5 minutes process of blood collection and then serially putting in the volume of bloods and adding it up induces collection on site. So you will have a clotted blood mixed with anticoagulant, and therefore you will produce a spurious or erroneous result using this technique. Okay, do we have any questions or clarifications with this case? If none, we go to the last case. And this is very important because this refers to the different principles of laboratory testing. And you have different A, B, C, D scenario. A creatinine level of 1.5. The reference value is 7 to 1.4. It's very near the normal, but it's a little bit off. Taken from an asymptomatic patient, is abnormal and must be provided with appropriate treatment. So is this correct? So we look into the principles of testing. A creatinine level of 4.1 is considered clinically significant and must be subjected to repeat testing to enhance precision. Letter C, the clinical utility and predictive value of the abnormal creatinine level is enhanced when BUN level is also increased. Letter D, laboratory tests have associated inherent systematic error in the method and physiologic variation that can significantly affect the outcome of the concentration levels in the pathologic stage. So what is the correct answer here? So the correct answer here is letter C, and let us examine the choices one by one. Choice 1. So basic principles of testing. There's no test that is perfect. There's no test that claims 100% sensitivity and specificity and predictive value. There is always an inherent systematic errors to the method inherent to that particular test. And these are very low, representing 0.1% up to 0.3%, and this is within the acceptable. Beyond 3%, error is unacceptable and must be treated with caution and investigation. Choice of test should be based on the prior probability of the diagnosis being sought, which affects the predictive value of the test. For example, if you have a patient who comes in with fever, high-grade fever, pediatric patient with rashes, petechial rashes, and you live in, for example, in London, should I consider testing for dengue hemorrhagic fever? I would not think about that and will not request for a dengue testing for NSI-1, and therefore I would think of other tests and will select the appropriate laboratory test based on the probability, endemicity of and predictive value. Okay. Another basic principle of lab testing is based on the statistical definition. Normality represents 94% range of values, and 5% of independent tests will be outside this normal range in the absence of disease. Meaning to say, statistically, the normal values of the patient lies within plus or minus 95% range, and the outliers there, the 5%, will be outside. But as long as there is no clinical features of the disease, they might be considered as normal range. So it must be outside of the 5%. If you have values that stays 15% out of the 95% confidence interval, that might be pathologic in nature and not physiologic. So the importance of this is finding value to what we call the reference value, or sometimes called normal value. The reference values are statistical data generated for 95% of normal population. The values outside of this range do not necessarily represent disease, but may be elevated above the patient's baseline. Hence, that's why serial testing is important. So if you look at the first clinical scenario, one of the clinical scenario, the choices of the problem, you have here a reference value of 1.5 and the patient's value is 1.5. Should I look at this as abnormal or part of the physiologic variation of the normal value? So next important principle is lab values that is increased 10 times the upper reference values are more likely to be clinically significant than the one that is only slightly increased. Very important to recognize if you have a value of the blood sugar at 102 and the upper limit is 100, and this probably may represent physiologic variation. But if you have a value of 180 and the reference value upper is 100, most likely this is likely to be clinically significant and abnormal. So excessive repetition of tests is wasteful and increases the possibility of laboratory errors. There must be appropriate intervals between tests, and these are dictated by patients' clinical conditions. The other important principle of lab testing is the multiple test abnormalities are more likely to be significant than a single test abnormality. For example, in identifying renal problem, we usually use two indices, laboratory indices, BUN and creatinine, in order to solidify the diagnosis of renal disease or renal insufficiency. Also, we use a gamut or panel testing for protein. We use total protein, albumin, globulin. And for liver function test, we use a panel of tests to evaluate a patient coming in with a liver problem. We use SGPT, SGOT. We use GGT. We use bilirubin levels to enhance the sensitivity and accuracy of the test. So, from the original question 3, this is correct. The clinical utility and predictive value of the abnormal creatinine level is increased when BUN level is also elevated. So this is the principle of the last test that was discussed. So you have any questions or comments or any other comments? I hope you're able to have a better understanding of the topic that was, or the lecture that was posted in your Canvas. And I wish you good morning because my time is up. So don't forget the evaluation form as requested by the Dean's office for you to answer.